Tensions are rising in the Caribbean, drawing in the United States, Venezuela, and China. The U.S. has ramped up its military presence near Venezuela, officially to fight drug trafficking. But many suspect the real aim is to oust President Nicolas Maduro. China, Venezuela's top oil customer and major lender, is now directly involved, challenging U.S. actions in the region. Venezuela, despite having the world's largest oil reserves, is in economic freefall, with millions fleeing and a humanitarian crisis unfolding. U.S. sanctions and a recent naval deployment have brought the threat of direct military action closer than ever. China's response has been diplomatic, condemning U.S. moves as violations of international law and a threat to regional peace. This marks a rare, open challenge to U.S. dominance in Latin America. The crisis is rooted in oil, politics, and decades of fraught U.S.-Venezuela relations. In this video, we'll break down why the U.S. has moved its military, China's economic stakes, and the dire situation inside Venezuela. We'll also look at how other countries are reacting as the world watches this dangerous standoff. Understanding these elements is crucial to grasping a conflict with global consequences. The stakes are high, and the outcome could reshape power in the Western Hemisphere. Let's dive into the heart of the crisis. Here's what you need to know. In late 2025, the Trump administration sent a powerful naval force to the Caribbean, including the USS Gerald R. Ford and thousands of troops. This is the largest U.S. military show of force in the region in years, signaling a dramatic policy shift. The U.S. has already launched over 20 strikes on suspected drug boats, resulting in dozens of deaths. President Trump has openly threatened to deploy troops on Venezuelan soil and declared Venezuelan airspace closed, a move often seen before U.S. interventions elsewhere. These actions have pushed the crisis to the brink of open conflict. The closure of airspace is a direct warning, interpreted by many as a prelude to attack. Diplomatic talks collapsed after Trump's ultimatum to Maduro failed, leaving military options on the table. Maduro's counteroffer for sanctions relief was rejected, ending negotiations. With diplomacy stalled, the U.S. now holds a clear military advantage. The world is watching as the U.S. moves from pressure to the edge of intervention. The stakes for Venezuela and the region have never been higher. The next steps could determine the fate of a nation and the balance of power in the Americas. The crisis is no longer hypothetical. It's unfolding in real time. The countdown to a possible conflict has begun. The Trump administration claims its military actions target drug trafficking, accusing Maduro's government of running the Cartel de los Soles. Critics argue this is an exaggerated pretext for regime change, not a genuine anti-drug campaign. Legal experts and the UN have condemned the strikes as extrajudicial killings and violations of international law. The U.S. justifies its actions by invoking the Monroe Doctrine, now updated with a Trump corollary warning outside powers, especially China and Russia, to stay out of Latin America. This policy links the anti-drug mission to a broader strategy of reasserting U.S. dominance. The drug war is just one front in a much larger geopolitical contest. The real battle is over influence and control in the Western Hemisphere. As tensions peaked, China stepped in with a strong diplomatic response. On December 3, 2025, China's foreign ministry condemned U.S. military actions and the closure of Venezuelan airspace as violations of international norms. China called for dialogue, urging all parties to respect the UN Charter and keep Latin America a zone of peace. Beijing's approach is strictly diplomatic. No troops, no warships, just public opposition to U.S. pressure. China's message: resolve differences peacefully and resist being drawn into conflict. This marks a new level of confidence for China in challenging U.S. dominance in the region. The crisis is now a diplomatic showdown between two global powers. China's calculated move is about protecting its interests and projecting itself as a responsible global player. The world is watching this high-stakes diplomatic clash. China's main interest in Venezuela is oil. Venezuela holds the world's largest reserves, and China is its top customer. Over the past decade, China has loaned billions to Venezuela, repaid in oil shipments. U.S. sanctions and Venezuela's economic collapse now threaten China's investments and future oil supplies. A U.S.-backed regime change could jeopardize China's loans and shift oil exports to the U.S. China's support for Maduro is pragmatic, protecting its financial and energy interests. But Venezuela is also key to China's broader strategy in Latin America, part of its Belt and Road Initiative. While China avoids military involvement, the crisis could boost Chinese and Russian arms sales in the region. For Beijing, stability means business, not war. The stakes are high, but China's approach remains economic and diplomatic. The outcome could reshape China's influence in the Americas. Venezuela faces external threats from a position of deep internal crisis. Despite vast oil wealth, years of mismanagement and U.S. sanctions have devastated the economy and triggered a humanitarian disaster. Nearly 8 million people have fled, and inflation is out of control. Venezuela's key allies, Russia, Iran, and China, provide military, economic, and diplomatic support, buffering it from total isolation. In Latin America, left-leaning governments like Cuba, Nicaragua, and Bolivia back Venezuela, while larger countries like Brazil and Colombia oppose military intervention. Most of the region rejects war, wary of repeating a long history of U.S. interventions. The refugee crisis and human rights abuses have divided opinion, but the prospect of war is deeply unpopular. Regional opposition complicates any U.S. invasion plans. The continent's painful past with foreign intervention acts as a brake on escalation. Venezuela's survival depends on its allies and the region's resistance to outside force. The crisis is a test of sovereignty, solidarity, and the limits of U.S. power. The world is watching how far the U.S. will go and who will stand in its way. The Venezuela crisis is a tangled web of oil, power, and sovereignty. The U.S. has escalated militarily, aiming for regime change under the guise of fighting drugs. China's response is economic and diplomatic, seeking to protect its investments and influence. Despite the drama, China has not sent troops. Its role is that of a stakeholder and counterweight. Venezuela, meanwhile, is in deep crisis, propped up by Russia and China, and facing regional resistance to U.S. intervention. The situation is fragile. One misstep could spark a wider conflict. This is a standoff between a superpower asserting dominance, a rising power defending its interests, and a nation struggling to survive. The world is watching to see if diplomacy can prevail. The fate of the Caribbean and the balance of power in the Americas hangs in the balance. The next moves will shape the region for years to come.